Howdy doody, watchmakers. This is not a guitar blues video, so I don't need these sunglasses. Get rid of them. They're cheap. That's why I can throw them. Anyway, I had a lot of questions on how to set up for making a balance staff properly. I'm going to show you a few things I do to make sure that that I've got all the equipment at hand that I need to use to make a balance staff. So first of all, first thing I need is the old balance staff. So, and what I do here is I wonder if I can zoom, is I take the old balance staff and I put it on a piece of Rodico. That's it there. And I use that for measuring and all that wonderful stuff. So, and I've got other videos to show how to do that, so I'm not going to address that right now. The second thing is you need a piece of blued steel, which I have sticking in the lathe right here. Try to talk to the camera. It's too hard to talk to your computer, or too easy to talk to your computer screen. Anyway, so I got a piece of blued steel in there, and so you put the blued steel in and you make it the right length. I've also showed that in other videos, but you got to have it a little longer than what the staff is, so you can cut it away and you can make the balance staff in one shot. So with the hairspring end on this side and the roller table on the other side, on the inside. This is an old G. Boley lathe I have. All my lathes are old, so I shouldn't say an oldie. It's got it came with a really nice micrometer tailstock here. That's beautiful, very nice for drilling and that sort of stuff. But you got to get out of the way. So the basic setup. This is a G. Boley lathe, like I said here. You can use a toothpick or something to center the piece of metal by putting it underneath the stock metal and pushing up as this spins, right? This particular lathe has got a nice counter shaft on it, which gives you good torque, so I can go low speed like that, and then I can increase the speed, and you want to be cutting at speed that's kind of like this. I'm not sure how many RPMs this is, but you don't need it to cut too high for this. And then when you want to smoothen things out or burnish them, you speed it up a bit, and that'll smooth the metal out on that. So anyway, this is a lathe. I normally have leather straps, but this one here I've got some rubberish, plastic rubber, whatever this stuff is, probably nylon strap in the back one, the green one. Sewing machine motor here, counter shaft here. These will run you around probably about $200 on eBay, maybe more, depending whether you're a good bidder or not. And I've got a few of these, but I love these stands here. These are Burrell stands, so I took the lathe off of its main stand, which is a single stand, and bolted onto a Burrell stand so the thing can move as one unit. The other thing I do is I have basically just a dish thing on the bottom here to catch all the dirt. I modified it, meaning I cut the back off because I've got watches and stuff over here. Let me just shoot down a bit. I got some pocket watches I'm working on here, and that's the modified staff there. So as well, I probably can lower this just to raise this up just a bit. So anyway, leave it like that. So the other thing that you need is a good set of gravers. So when I start the lathe, or start the balance staff off, before I get into the gravers, I'll show you the glasses I use. So I just buy a typical set of 3 times drugstore glasses here, and then I've got a loop, which is a flip over loop, which is really handy. So when you want to do your work, you do that. I don't usually work with a cowboy hat on, but what the heck, it's cowboy day today. I did a good 30 minutes on my speed bag today just to get going, and and that's for exercise because everybody's indoors right now. So for this COVID-19, hopefully you're staying indoors so we can kill this thing, right? So, and fight this virus. So good time to do some watch work. So I have a flip over, and I use a 3 or 5 times, I think 5 times with a flip over like that to get pretty close. So my initial cuts, I can use this in my initial cuts. If I cough a little bit, I do have allergies, and I think it's dust related. Then when I want to get up close, grab these back here. I have a set of these. I just bought them online. They're pretty cheap. You can get them on Amazon. And I've got the other lens here for this, and I put this on when I'm getting up close, and that's so you can put a piece of tape over this, so when you're working here with the gravers, you don't get distracted, because I'm only looking through one eye. I'm left-eyed, so if you're right-eyed, you may have to shift this whole configuration the other way. But I'm left-eyed, so I'm left-handed for everything but writing. So when I get in close like this, I can easily focus on one eye and just ignore the other one. But I do this so the shards of steel don't go in my eye, which is not good. You would be very upset if that happened to you, right? So this is for holding another camera. Anyway, so what I do is I've got a set of gravers here. Let me just take these out for a second. I use a few gravers on this. So the first one I have is a triangular tungsten carbide graver, and I got this graver from, I think it was Orphe or autofree.com. So it's tungsten, GRS tungsten carbide graver. I think it'll zoom for me. Do you think it'll zoom for me? Let me see. There you go. Tungsten carbide graver. There you go. And that's if you want to buy one of those. Just Google that, and I got it from these guys here, right? So I start off with this graver, right? And I and it's a triangular tipped. I'll show that to you as well. And I cut the material for the balance when I start this off. There's the balance here, and I'm trying to grab that with my tweezers. So there's the balance, and the first cut I make is for fitting the balance, and then I cut for the hairspring, and then I cut for the pivot, and then I flip the thing around, and then I finish the part of the piece of metal that this snugs up along into, right? I finish that off. It's usually at a bit of an angle, and then I flip this around. I do the roller table part next, and then I do the back pivot. Usually I do the roller table and pivot with a rough cut, and when I flip the metal around after I cut it off, I'm able to finish off the roller table and size it properly, and use the parts themselves to fit it. I do the basic measurement. I got a gauge here. Let me grab this gauge here, and this is my Douzieme gauge. That's French for Douzieme, so which is French for Douzieme. Anyway, so I got my Douzieme gauge. I'm not very funny. Somebody said I was interesting to listen to, but I don't think so. My wife will tell you differently. Anyway, I use this to grab the piece of metal, and then I can see on the end here what this specific measurement is here. So if I do this thing is it's going 10, it's about 12, right? So it's about 12 thick. I usually measure my balance staff I'm going to make, and if I measure the end here quickly, because I don't want to bore you too much, I'm looking at 10, 16, so that's about running at about 16 thick, and I said that was 12, so I've already lied to you, and we just started, so there's no way that's 12. This is 15, 16, 17, so that's 17, so I only have to take 0.1 of a millimeter off of this thing, right, to start. So that's the major thickness. So this is another tool I use. This is great. I got two of these actually. They're easy to find. I believe it's called a Douzieme gauge, and this one's made in England. It's old. A little spring in the back here. Boing, boing, boing. So that and then this end is for measuring, and this end gives you the units here and millimeters on top. So I use this a lot. I do this for my initial cuts, so I don't waste my time. I can just cut down and measure, cut down and measure, and then when I get close enough, I start using the part itself to slowly grave at 3 degrees and move the part up the ladder here as I get closer to friction fitting it. And I have explained that in other videos, so I'm not going to go through all that K-wrap again. See how I'm keeping it clean. So the actual this is the tip. Can I zoom in on that? Will that zoom? This is a new camera. This is like a Logitech something 22. There we go. That's what it looks like. So I'll just put that in the back of my finger here so it'll zoom. Come on, zoom. You're my friend. Zoom, zoom. There we go. That's what it looks like there. So, and I start my cuts with this. So that's the first one. I'll actually leave that in there. And then the next, when I get into a little more detailed cuts, like I've got a set of 4 of these, and they're marked 2R, 4R, 4F, and 2F, right? So I start off, sometimes I start off with the 4F, and that's 4 flat on the end. So these little babies are, and I'll show you if I can, they're Valerobe Swiss made. Make sure if you can see that, right? There it is there. Valerobe or something, Swiss made. These are also tungsten carbide, and I marked them with a marker. This is 4F here. And this is kind of what they look like up close. I'll leave it in its little package so you can see it. I want you to see the tip though, right? So that's what they look like in their package. Again, I need to zoom. Come on! I like talking to my camera. That's kind of what they look like. I think the back of the hand zooming is the best. So I know what I'll do. I'll put a rubber band on my hand, and then I'll tie this to the rubber band, and then I'll zoom in on it. Think that'll work? Probably not. This is like engineering 101. There. It's like that, and you can get a zoom of my ugly fingernail that needs cutting. There we go. So, does this work? Look at that. I think it worked. And you can see the end of that, and as I rotate it, you see how thin that is? That's how thin it is. It's incredibly thin. And that tip that you see is 4 millimeters across. I think it's 4 millimeters across. Anyway, 4 millimeters across. So, and that's pretty wide. So I'll put that into, this is kind of a retarded way of doing that. But anyway, I'll put that into one of my graver handles as well, like so, like that, and then tighten that. And then when I want to get in really close with this, for some of the cuts that are very, when I'm finishing off the cut for the balance itself, I'll use this to take material away because it's really, really precise. Then, as I get into the hairspring, and really I use this for the pivot, I'll go too flat for the pivot, so I'll do the same thing as I start forming my pivot. I'll use the same one here and see if this marking is any better. Oh yeah, there it is. That shows about a better, if you want to look at that code there, that's a bit better. That's the part there, so just Google that and you'll probably be able to find it. So I use this too flat to start working the pivot, and then when you know how the pivot kind of goes, it goes from the shaft and it goes down for catching the oil and up again, and then it cones, and 3/4 of the pivot is the cone, or I shouldn't say 3/4. 2/3 of the pivot is the cone, and then 1/3 is the actual pivot itself, which is usually like somewhere between 0.09 and 0.13 millimeters thick. I think the one I'm making today is 0.13 millimeters thick. So the flat ones I use for doing some fine work, and then the round one, the one that's here that's rounded, the tip of that, if you look at, if this were the tip like that, it's kind of long and flat. The tip is rounded here. It's domed or rounded here, and so when you sharpen it, it stays rounded, and that's really, really good for rounding off the cone part of that pivot. It makes it so easy when you have a rounded graver, and that's 2 millimeters on the end, which is pretty small, and you can get really up close and do some fine work. I can get, if I can do I use the cone one or the rounded one to do the coning, and then when I get to the pivot itself, I can get that pivot down to probably about 0.16 millimeters with a graver, which is pretty good. So once I've done that and the graver stuff is finished, the next thing I need to do is use the stone to finish the pivot, and I've shown you how I do that. I've shown you a few times actually. I make way too many videos how I do that. So I've got this 2 stones. I can't remember the name. They're Arkansas stones, I believe. I think this is an Arkansas stone here. So this is the one I use the most, so I'm not even going to talk about this one. So I use an Arkansas stone. That's what it looks like there. And this stone is on the tip, it's got one edge of it here that is actually rounded. The other ones are 90 degrees, and one edge is rounded. So obviously the rounded edge, when you start working on the pivot, you put the rounded edge on the inside, and it conforms to the shape of the cone, right? So you're not going to be flattening out that cone if you use the rounded edge of this stone. And then you hold. When I hold the stone, let me show you how I hold the stone. When I hold the stone, I don't hold it like tight like that, because I will break the pivot. I actually let the stone rest on my finger here like that, and my end finger, and I put my thumb down really lightly, and that way when I start working the metal like this, see if I can find a piece of metal I can just rub back and forth on. I don't care about. Let me just take this piece of wood, just pretend that's the pivot. And when I'm working the pivot here, I'll take this and I'll just start doing this as it's spinning, and try to go back and forth pretty straight. Don't go angled and everything else. You just go like this. And then if the pivot, if there's a little weight on there sometimes, see that I'm not worried about putting too much pressure on here, so I'm holding it like this. Not a lot of pressure here, and there we go. So this is almost not being held here on the end with my finger, right? So that allows me to work that pivot really carefully without snapping it off. So that's the way you kind of hold it. So it's kind of like when you're fencing, right? If you're fencing and you hold your foil too tight, then you're going to have you won't have the feel of the tip of the foil, right? It's pretty obvious. So like I was saying, when you're fencing and you hold your foil like this, you actually hold your foil just the same way you're holding the stone. You're holding it like this, nice and lightly, like that. You have very little movement here, right? You basically hold it with two fingers, and this is a French Paul foil, and it conforms to my left hand, because as I said earlier, I'm left-handed. And when I hold the foil, I hold it like this, so that this can be very controlled. The tip can be controlled really well. If I held it like that, I can't control the tip as well. So that's how it's the same way you hold the stone, the same way you hold a foil if you're gonna fence somebody. And I bet you're surprised that I had a foil. It's like, let me describe something and then describe something else that makes no sense at all. Anyway, so the next step, the other tool I have is I've got, this is also used for working the pivots, and it's for filing and burnishing. So I don't typically, this is the filed end, so this can file metal off. I don't typically use that. It has a rounded end just like the other one. Maybe today I'll try it, because I have to make a balance staff today for a beautiful old watch. But I use the other end for burnishing. So once you get the pivot down to the right size, this end is used for burnishing, and all it is a piece of steel, and it's got little lines across it like that, and you put some oil on it. I use this oil, which is 0W20. I use this for the lathe too. I put the oil in here so I've got it nicely lubricated, and I won't wear out the cone bearing on this lathe. And I use it for the counter shaft as well, and I don't use any of it on the motor, the old sewing machine motors. They're kind of self-lubed. I think you got to put it and lube them every now and then, but really I don't use it enough to do that. So anyway, these cost you around $100 for this file, and they're also from the same company that if I can get that to focus. Same company that those files come from, Val or whatever. I'll spell it out here for you, okay? Vallorbe, Vallorbe, Swiss. So I use this as the final step to burnish the pivots. Now, if once you, so let me see, is that all of this for that? Is all the stuff I use so far? Perhaps. If you really, when you're building a balance, like I said to somebody yesterday, make sure the pivots are too long, right? You got to make them a bit oversized, because when you drop, you have the balance with just the balance on it, the balance staff, the whole complete unit with just the balance on it, and then you drop that unit without the hairspring on it and without the roller table on it, and you put it in the watch, and then you use a puffer like this. I used that in another video, and you puff it, and the balance should swing freely with everything installed. No problems at all. Once you've done that, you know the balance is fitted right. If you make them if you make the pivots too big, which is good, and you can determine whether you have to lower, like take material off the bottom pivot or the top pivot to make it fit perfectly as you take the balance cock, right, which is right here, like this. Let me see if I can grab that. If you take the balance cock and you're putting it on, and if the pivot's too long, it sort of rides up a bit. But then you can make sure that the impulse jewel in the bottom is touching the fork perfectly, right? You can also, before you cut this off the lathe, take your old watch and have a look at where that particular pivot started and how long that pivot was. And I usually take my old balance, right, and I compare it, continuously compare it, because my first cut I make on this is actually, I'm viewing the old balance and I'm looking where the back part of that balance sits against, like rests against the balance staff itself, and that's where I make my very first cut, because that's where the cut's going to be made for the friction fit. The metal that's going to be the balance going to be friction fitting to. That's bad English. The metal that the whatever, and then ended it with a 2. There you go. Bad English. Well, I am an engineer, so I went into engineering because I don't speak well English. It's good French. Anyway, so that's what I use there. So did I cover everything? Oh yeah, another thing too. Here you've got your tip over tool rest, right? See if I can grab this and show you. So this is your tool rest here, like that, and it should be flat as hell, like pristine. Shouldn't be any ridges in there at all. So I saw somebody trying to make a balance staff, and it was on a blog, and he showed his lathe with the tool rest, and this tool rest, your graver is riding on this tool rest and going back and forth. So if you've got little indentations on the tool rest here, your balance is gonna go up and down, like I'm exaggerating, but your balance will conform to the dents in your tool rest. So the last thing you want is for the balance, you having problems doing fine work because this is shitty, right? So you take a file, right, and then you basically attack this with the file at an angle and make sure this is absolutely smooth, right? So because you're going to do precision work, you have to make sure the stuff you're doing precision work, the tools are precise, right? So I can't get this thing back in. Oh, there we go. So you have to make sure that's precise as well. So once you've done that, you've cut your balance. Try not to get too tired, by the way, when you're doing this, because if you get tired near the end of cutting the balance, when you start to do the pivot end, that's when you actually shouldn't be tired. So if you have to step away, take a break for an hour or even a day, come back later on, and I just burped. Anyway, come back later on and finish the balance. You're better off than trying to cut it after you're over here for about an hour or 2 hours cutting this balance staff and realizing I'm exhausted. Why don't I work on the pivot? So again, don't work on the pivot if you're exhausted. So, and as like I said earlier, I can't find the stone I had in my hand a few seconds ago. The other thing is, when you're doing watchmaking, things just disappear. I don't know what it is. It's like David Blaine or something. It's pick a card, any card, I think is what it is. So speaking of that, so this is an average card deck here. This is a watchmaker's card deck, right? That you can cut the cards like this, right? You can cut the cards like this over your hand. You can grab the cards and you can cut them like this, like that, right? You can cut the cards, let me see, did I cut the cards like this? So you cut the cards like that, and then you can pick a card, any card, and I won't even look at it. I won't even look at it. Okay, that's the card you're picking right there. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to put that card back into the deck. I'm not looking at it, right? So we'll put that card back into the, what do I do here? So I got the deck, you put it in, put it back into the deck like so, right? And then let me see how this trick goes. I can't remember. Okay, then you shuffle the deck a few times like that, right? And then you take the top card and you go, is that your card? And you go, no. Is that the back of it? That's the front of it. So you take that card. Let me just put that in here somewhere so I can find the other card. See that? Is that your card? No. This is card magic in the middle of watchmaking. So put that in the deck like that, and then is that your card? Oh my God, that's an amazing trick. If you like the trick, let me know. I'll show you another one later. Anyway, so that was a quick, or just a brief moment to distract you. Anyway, so the other thing I have that I use quite often is my J-Cot tool. Let me grab that for a second. I've got a nice old J-Cot tool. That is a J-Cot tool here. I do have videos online to show exactly how to use this J-Cot tool. And the balance goes on the end with the balance staff, and you've got lanterns on one side, and you've got little pivot rests on the other side. You pick the right size, you do that, it's got a bow on it, you go wah, 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 like that, and that's to finalize the pivot. If you've got to work on that pivot and you need to use a J-Cot because you fitted it and everything else, but you still need a little bit more work. As well, I've got another tool I use too. Okay, this is the other tool I use, and let me just show you this like that. And similar to the J-Cot, you put the pivot, so this thing here, you put the balance on here with the balance staff, and you have this thing here, it's got 3 holes on it, 1, 2, 3, and the other side of the balance staff with the pivot sticks through here. You adjust it so it's completely centered. You can use a bow to spin that around, or you can use a badge, like one of those retractable badge spring things, and attach it on one side and then spring it on the other, and that kind of works. I just throw that into a vise, and if I have to work on that pivot, on the end of that pivot, I'll stick the pivot through the hole there. If you have to reduce the size of the pivot, that's a good way of doing it as well, because you can actually work on the size, sort of make it a little smaller. One real caution here is as you're working on your balance staff and stuff, and you've got your pivots and they're extra long and everything seems to be working well, don't get anxious and just shave the end of the pivot down because you go, oh my God, it's too long, and shave it down some more. I usually use the stone I can't find. That's on my desk here somewhere, wherever that is. It's usually under something. Anyway, I usually use the stone to reduce the size of the pivot and or to flatten the end. I flatten the end of the pivot, and then I'll use the burnishing tool sometimes to give it a little bit of an edge as well. Although it's supposed to be riding on the stone fairly flat, I try to dome it just a bit, just so it's almost frictionless when it goes through the jewel and hits the cap jewel on the top or bottom. But anyway, don't get too anxious there and just work your pivot down to nothing. I did that before, and it's very depressing. You've spent like 2.5 hours working on this beautiful balance staff, and at the last minute you go, oh, too long again. You do some more work on it, and then all of a sudden your pivot is now too short, and you cannot lengthen a pivot. Once it's too short and your balance staff is too short for the job, and balance won't fit properly because your pivots are too short, you got to start all over again. You got to punch the balance off of the staff and pop the roller table off, and then start all over again. Very depressing. So I think I have other videos online where I've shown you how to actually put the parts back on once you've made the balance staff. It's not too difficult. There is one book that I should recommend that I used a lot. I had a video online, a video that said, here's the books you need. If you get any books, these are the books. It's definitely not a book on card magic and how to fool your friends, right? It's a book on card magic. Wait, it's getting hot in here. Oh my God. Anyway, it's not a book on card magic. I do close-up magic, by the way. Just thought I'd let you know. Been doing it for years. It's this book. It's called The Watch Repairer's Manual. It's by Fried, Henry Fried, as opposed to Henry Boiled. I have a really corny sense of humor. They call it dad jokes, but I've been telling dad jokes since I was like 13 years old. So anyway, so this is a really, really, really good book. So it has sections on how to make a balance staff in here. It's got Let me see if I can find. It actually has the Douzieme gauge in there. Look at that. Douzieme gauge, baby. Look at that. It's right there. So, and it has a section on how to make a balance staff. Actually, I'm looking at it right now, I think. Yeah, it's showing the initial cuts and how to fit the balance in here with the initial cut, and then it's showing you how to do the cut. They're using a pointed graver like the triangular graver. I use that for like I said, for the initial cut, and then I go down to the smaller gravers. It's a lot easier to work with. Buddy's got a rounded graver here. Look at that. So he does use a rounded tip graver to make the cone. I didn't even know that, and I didn't even know you could get triangular rounded tip gravers. But the one I have works perfectly, right? And he's showing how you make the other end of it, and then you use the gauge to do the measuring, blah blah, and then cut it off at the end, bang, separate the part, and away you go. Anyway, this book is gold, Jerry. It's gold. So you don't want to do work without having this book, because you can always refer to it when you forget how to put parts on or do whatever, right? So excellent book. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I've missed. Dibby-dooby-doo, I don't think so. I think pretty much that's it. So anyway, if you have any questions, so anyway, it's a Boley lathe. I'm hoping these belts don't break in the middle of making the pivot, because that would be bad luck. Make sure you take this out of your lathe before you start, because this goes in here, and that's for making stems. I should someday make a video on how to make watch stems, right? That would be pretty cool. Anyway, too many videos. So that's effectively a Boley lathe and a Burrell stand with a counter shaft and a sewing machine motor. And I'm trying to remember the name of that jobby do I have down here. It's a, oh, I'm going to use my flashlight on my cell phone to look down at my pedal, and I'll tell you exactly what the name of that pedal is. It is a Lucas, L-U-C-A-S. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a picture of it and show it to you. This is like live entertainment here, okay? That's as opposed to turning off the phone. Bam! Okay, there's a picture of my foot, my toe, and the Lucas pedal, and all the inputs to my stereo stuff. So there we go. So there's the Lucas pedal. Not sure if you can see that, but it's a very beautiful pedal. That's there. That's a better angle there. So there's my foot and the Lucas pedal, and that is a one heck of a good pedal. It's a sewing machine pedal, or sorry, it's a dentist pedal, so it's used for operating dental drills and other things. So anyway, that's about as long as I should be talking today. So 32 minutes of wonderful entertainment. Threw in a card trick in the middle of it. I can also teach you how to back palm a card if you're interested. So hold the card in your hand like that, like this, put your fingers like this. That's stage 2, and then open your hand up, and that's stage 3, and that's going to back palm the card. So like that. So you're back palming the card, and like that. So that's pretty good magic. So that's magic right in the middle of one of these videos. And I can also show you how to, there's one more thing, I should shut up. This is how you shuffle a deck with one hand. Now you're going to watch this video and not get to the end, and you're not going to see this. One hand, the one hand card shuffle. I think there's only like a couple of people in the world that can do this one. Like that, separate the deck, put them together like this. Weave, baby, weave, like that. Got them weaved, squeeze them together, shuffled, right? Well, almost shuffled. Partially shuffled. Anyway, that's how you shuffle a deck. So I'll show you bottom deals and all such other things next time I do a watch video. Anyway, hopefully this has been at least a little bit entertaining. Showed you what tools I use to make a balance staff, and again, I should shut up. So see you later. Thanks for watching, and if you like the video, say something that you like it. I'll continue. If you don't like the video and you think I talk way too much, then turn the video off. If next time you turn on, oh, there's a guy that wanted me to play some guitar, so hang on. So you can't end the video without playing a bit of guitar and some Stevie Ray Vaughan. actually screwed it up. I'll play Dust in the Wind. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.